friendship that'll never ever end.
Run!
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Reaction Beanie Yo for 132. Day in that neighborhood, my brothers and sisters. Once again, my friends, it is time to go back to the man. It is time to go back to the myth. It is time to go back to the legend. MrBallen. Another MrBallen Sunday, y'all. Hope y'all doing excelente out there today. And I'm glad that you came on back to the channel once again to fuck with the bean. And the title of the video is A Hallmark Holiday Hellscape. Now, the only thing that I can get from this title, y'all, my only prediction is that something effed up happened on a holiday, man. You know what I'm saying? And boy, I don't know what it is. I don't know where MrBallen going with this story. But best believe, whatever it is, wherever he going with this story, it's about to be crazy. But before we see how crazy it is, my brothers and sisters, y'all know what y'all got to do. Get whatever you may need. Get what you need, please. Another MrBallen Sunday. Y'all got what y'all need? Y'all ready to go? Then let's fucking go.
There is a little cottage right on the water in Maryland called Cottage 506. It's a rustic place with a wood fire stove, a couple of small beds, and a small sitting area for breakfast. And then outside the cottage on the porch, you have this amazing view of the water. And then behind the cottage is the resort that the cottage is a part of. And the resort offers guests that stay in this cottage great food, great entertainment. I mean, this is a great spot. However, Cottage 506 has a dark secret. And it's the reason I and many other people will never be staying there. But before we learn about Cottage 506, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please offer to house sit for the like button while they're away for the weekend, but instead of looking after their property, just spend the entire weekend downloading viruses to the like button's computer. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
Ballen!
A little afternoon on Valentine's Day 1998, a married couple named Steve and Kim Rico held hands as they walked towards their car. They had just dropped their 8-year-old daughter off at a neighbor's house in the suburban neighborhood in Maryland where they lived, and now Steve and Kim had the whole weekend to themselves, and they were really excited about it because they had this big trip planned. Now, admittedly, Kim had no idea what they were actually going to be doing because Steve was the one who planned it, and he was obviously being very secretive about the details. He wanted this to be a surprise. And so for weeks leading up to this weekend, Kim would see Steve on the phone all the time, presumably planning whatever it is they were going to be doing, but he wouldn't let Kim hear what he was saying on the phone. He would kind of muffle his voice, or he'd hang up before she could come over and hear him. And then also after these secretive phone calls, Kim would often see Steve writing all these notes down in his journal, presumably about whatever it was he was planning. The only details Steve shared with Kim about this trip was, make sure you wear something nice. When the couple reached their car, Steve hopped in the driver's seat and Kim hopped in the passenger seat, and immediately, right after Steve had fired up the car, Kim turned to him and said, "Are you going to tell me? You going to tell me where we're going?" But Steve just grinned and said, "Nope, it's a surprise." Kim gave a theatrical sigh and sat back and feigned frustration, But inside, the way she was really feeling was just excited. This was so cool that Steve had put so much effort into whatever it is they were going to do, but also Kim was seeing her husband was really making a big effort to make her happy. And this was kind of new because lately their relationship had been really rocky. Kim and Steve had been married for 9 years by this point, and they were both very, very different people. Steve was a total homebody, kind of introverted, and Kim was the opposite. She was super extroverted and very social. But when they first met each other, it was actually their stark differences that brought them together. For Kim,
and that's one thing that happened a lot in relationships. Opposites attract. You know what I'm saying? Like two different batteries. They got to be plus and minus to attract each other. You know what I'm saying, man? But I just want to say that it is cute what Steve is doing with Kim. You know what I'm saying? Like, as far as him planning a trip out and not telling her, you know, like that type of stuff in relationships is needed to keep the relationship spicy, to keep it good, to keep it fun, to keep the love there. So shout out to Steve for doing this, but I hope whatever he planning is not nothing malicious or crazy. I just hope that they be alive at the end of this story, y'all. And I'm not saying that he know whatever they get into is going to be crazy or malicious or whatever, but I'm just hoping it's not. I'm not blaming Steve yet, but I got my eye on him.
Kim, when they met, she was in her early 20s, she had just dropped out of college, and her experience with men so far had been she would meet them at parties or bars, and at first it would seem like their relationship was great, but then invariably these guys would just kind of move on and break Kim's heart. But Steve was different. He was this huge guy, 6'4", massive football player, but he was totally a gentle giant. And as soon as he met Kim, Kim could tell this guy is different. He's treating her with respect, you know, he's loyal to her, he really cares about her, and so they hit it off right away. And Kim very quickly became pregnant, at which point Steve asked her to marry him, and Kim didn't hesitate for a second. They were totally in love. And marriage to Steve had really been a stabilizing factor in Kim's life. She wound up going back to college and got her degree, which landed her a job as a surgical technician, which is what she did now. And Steve turned out to be just a fantastic father, and he wound up actually staying home with their daughter when she was a baby so Kim could go out and work. And Kim always thought it was funny when she would come home and she would see Steve standing in the doorway cradling this infant, but he's like this massive person, and so their baby looked like a toy. But unfortunately, over the last year, Kim had seen a change in Steve. He went from being a shy person, but a person who could go out and function in society, to a shy person who basically stopped going outside altogether. Steve basically refused to go out anywhere with Kim. He didn't want to talk to anyone. He didn't want to spend time with their friends or family. He just wanted to stay home and watch TV or hang out in the basement. I mean, it was pretty obvious he was depressed, but his introvertedness was becoming kind of stifling for Kim. And so Kim approached Steve and said, "You really need to go to therapy to get better here. You know, I'll go with you. We can do couples therapy." But Steve refused. And so finally, right around this past New Year, Kim decided she had just had enough. She was totally unhappy. She did not feel like Steve was going to change. And so Kim told Steve that she wanted to get divorced. And when Steve heard that, he realized the gravity of this situation. He knew Kim was unhappy with him, but he did not know she was thinking about separating. And so Steve kind of broke down and begged Kim to give him another chance. You know, let him prove to her that he will change, that he wants this marriage to work. And Kim said, okay. And so that was how Steve wound up planning this very secret getaway on Valentine's Day. This trip,
I'm starting to get very suspicious of Steve. I don't know why, y'all. I know some of y'all out there may be feeling the same way, but I'm starting to get suspicious of Steve, man. He might be taking this lady off to do something with her. I mean, to do something to her because he know that she about to leave his ass. I don't know, y'all. I hope that ain't what it is, man. But I'm just starting to get more and more suspicious of him because when she was saying, I want to get a divorce, and he this introverted person who don't even want to go outside or associate with none of the outside world, all of a sudden he like, I need to help my wife. I need to keep my wife, so I need to do this. So let's go on this trip. Man, I don't know. Maybe he doing it out of kindness of his heart. Maybe he really trying to keep her. But right now, I'm getting a little suspicious, y'all. But let's see.
Was supposed to be the start of their new and improved marriage, and so Kim was really excited and optimistic about the future. After driving for about an hour and a half, Steve pulled off the highway and began following signs towards the Eastern Shore, which is a waterfront area of Maryland that's very beautiful, that was located about 70 miles away from Steve and Kim's home. After driving for a few minutes, Steve pulled into the parking lot of the Harbortown Golf Resort. And as soon as he pulled into a spot and turned off the car, he clapped his hands and turned to Kim and said, "Okay, we're here." And Kim looked from her husband out to all the perfectly manicured grounds and the beautiful resort, and she smiled and leapt out of the car excitedly. Kim and Steve took each other's hands and marched inside to check in, and as they were checking in, the person behind the desk gave them glasses of champagne, and then after handing Kim and Steve their key cards, the receptionist told them that their cottage where they were staying was like the nicest property at the resort. Kim and Steve were totally pumped. They took their champagne and their room keys, they walked back to their car, and then drove a little ways deeper into the resort to their cottage. It was cottage 506, and it looked out over the water. And when they went inside, Kim was totally wowed. It was this rustic suite with a wood fire stove in the middle and 2 queen-size beds and a little coffee table area for breakfast over here. It was perfect. And then when Kim actually walked into this cottage, she noticed there was a card sitting on a table, and it looked like a wedding invitation. Kim was confused and looked over at Steve, and Steve just smiled and said, "Go, check it out." And so Kim walked over and she grabbed the note and she began reading it, and as she did, she began to smile. The card really was a wedding invitation, albeit it was for a fake wedding, because it would turn out this was not just a random overnight that Steve had planned for both of them. Instead, he had purchased a romantic getaway package, which included this amazing cottage, but also a professional dinner theater performance that would be held on the resort grounds. Kim read the description of the dinner theater show on this invitation. It was a murder mystery called The Bride Who Cried, where the actors in the show would put on a whole fake wedding, and then at the end of the wedding, somebody would get killed, and the audience would need to figure out who did it. For an extrovert like Kim, an activity like this was perfect. And so Kim felt totally touched that clearly Steve had heard her, and the first thing he did to kind of win her back was to begin to do the things that Kim really wanted to do, which was really going out and having fun. And so after Kim finished reading the card, she turned and looked over at Steve, and Steve was kind of nervous because he wasn't sure if Kim was going to like it. And Kim, she broke into this huge smile. She walked over to Steve and gave him a big hug. And
Okay, now all of a sudden I'm starting to believe Steve a little bit. Now I'm starting to trust him. I was just talking about how I don't trust him. I'm suspicious of him, but now I'm starting to believe that he is kind of like doing the right thing. But it's one thing that I want to talk about real quick, my brothers and sisters. I don't know where I heard a story similar to this at who channel, you know what I'm saying? We watch a lot of different channels over here. But there was this one story about, like, it be groups of people out here who do stuff like that, like the murder mystery game. Like it be groups of people who come together and they come up with this big murder mystery, and everybody got to figure out who the murderer actually is. And this is very similar to that, but that story ended horribly. And I'm not going to say how it ended because this one might end a lot like that, and I don't want to spoil it. But if it's going the way I'm thinking it's going, mind blown. That's all I'm gonna say, man. Let's go.
Steve, he was so happy, and he hugged her real tight right back. Kim and Steve would spend the next couple of hours sitting by their fire inside of their nice cottage, drinking their champagne and talking about the future and just telling stories and having a good time. And then around 7 p.m., Steve and Kim put on their nicest clothes and walked their way over to the area on the resort where this dinner theater was going to happen. It was in an event hall with a bunch of round tables set up for the audience. And so once Steve and Kim and the other audience members all took their seats, the actors and actresses came into the room, and they were all dressed in their wedding clothes. There was a bride and a groom and a wedding party, and the audience was instructed to participate in the wedding as if they were wedding guests. And so the audience all stood up, and they began kind of having this fake social hour of meeting all the wedding guests. And then Steve, Kim, and the audience members all took their seats, and they got ready to watch the drama unfold. And Kim, pretty much immediately, was totally absorbed in this performance. She was so enthusiastic, talking to the actors and talking to the other guests, and really pretending like she was part of the wedding. I mean, she was having a blast. The play itself was about a groom who was in the mafia, who was forcing his bride to marry him by threatening her family. The climax came when the groom stood up and gave a toast with his champagne. He took a sip and then fell down dead. Kim watched all of this with delight, but she kept looking over at Steve, hoping he too would be smiling and having a good time. but each time she looked at him, he was just kind of stone-faced and looking straight ahead, like he just didn't care or he was totally disinterested. And then a couple of times when Kim leaned over and said, "Hey, honey, who do you think did it? Who do you think the killer is?" Steve basically just completely ignored her. It was like she wasn't there and the play wasn't there. He was just totally zoned out. Eventually, Kim and a few other very enthusiastic audience members figured out the killer in the play was the bride's mother, who poisoned the groom, and then after this discovery was made, the play was over. As everyone got up from their seats and began to leave, Kim couldn't help but feel really annoyed with Steve because he was just so silent and not invested in this play. And it's like, we came all the way here, why aren't you at least pretending to enjoy this? But Kim also thought, Steve put a ton of effort into this weekend. He's clearly trying. I'm not going to start a fight. I'm not going to bring it up. And so finally, Kim just said to Steve, "Hey, why don't we go to the bar and get a couple of drinks, bring them back to our cottage, and just hang out there for the night?" And when Steve heard this, he actually smiled and said, "Okay, great, let's do it." And by the time the couple got back to the front door of Cottage 506, they were holding hands again and laughing and telling stories, and they went inside and Steve put the beers down on the table, and then Kim said she was going to go in the bedroom and just quickly change into something more comfortable. And so Kim walked into the bedroom and shut the door, and Steve walked to the front door and turned the lock. Hey everybody!
MrBallen commercial, but I'm thinking hard with this one, y'all, because now I want to go back. I done went across the fence saying that Steve is suspicious. Then I went back across the fence saying that he not suspicious. And now I want to go back across the fence again saying he is suspicious. I don't know, y'all. I'm trying to figure it out, man. I think he might have did something, y'all. I think this, because why was he acting like that at the little murder mystery play thing? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is crazy, man. I know this ending is about to be just what the is going on type of ending. Let's see.
Three hours later, a man named Philip Parker, who was staying at the resort with his family, heard a commotion in the lobby, and he heard people saying there might be a fire at Cottage 506 and there could be somebody still inside. Philip immediately turned to his cousin who was with him, and the two of them bolted outside and just started running towards Cottage 506. And as soon as they got to a place where they could see the cottage from a distance, they could see black, oily smoke pouring out of the windows. When they got up to the burning cottage, Philip ran to the front door, but it was locked. He couldn't get inside. He screamed to see if anybody was in there, but there was no answer. And so Philip and the cousin ran around to the back of the cottage where there was a glass sliding door, and Philip, he tried the handle, but it was locked. At this point, the cousin said he was going to run back to the resort and get a fire extinguisher, and after the cousin ran off, Philip turned back towards the sliding glass door and realized it actually opened on both ends, and he had only checked one side and found that side to be locked, but on the other side, which he was now noticing, it was obviously unlocked because it was open just barely. And so Philip immediately opened it up and all the smoke began coming out, and so Philip dropped down to get a better look because down low the smoke had not fully settled. There was a bit of an air pocket right at the bottom of the floor, and so Philip got down and he looked inside, and for a second he couldn't quite see anything, but then he noticed in the middle of the bedroom, right inside this cottage, he could clearly see somebody's feet. Somebody was on the ground. And so Philip screamed that he was coming in, and then he opened the door the rest of the way, and he began low crawling into the bedroom. And as he did, he was hacking and coughing from all the smoke. And so finally, Philip reached this person, and he grabbed their foot, and he shook them to try to wake them up. But they weren't moving. But the fire was getting bigger and stronger. The smoke was getting thicker. Philip was really starting to panic and was worried that he too would get trapped in here. And so he just grabbed this person's leg and began pulling them. And it was really hard, but he finally got this person back to the door. He couldn't quite get them over that lip of where the sliding door was. But right then, Philip's cousin showed up, and the two of them were able to grab this person and get them out of the cottage. And this was the moment when Philip finally got a look at the person he was just dragging out, and it was immediately clear to him that this person was deceased. Their face was basically gone. It was completely burned away. In the days and weeks leading up to this weekend, Steve really was taking secret phone calls and writing notes down in his journal because he was planning something very special. But he was not the only one with plans for this weekend. Here's what police say happened after Kim and Steve got back to their cottage following the show, and Kim went into the bedroom to change, and Steve went to the front door and locked it. A couple of minutes
Before MrBallen said, y'all, I just want to let y'all know I have no idea. I don't have no prediction, man. I ain't got nothing. Like I wanted to say some crazy-ish, like Steve knew all along that he was gonna kill her, and he had some type of crazy thought in his mind that showing a play of a murder mystery party. It was like a foreshadowing to what he was gonna do later. Like, yeah, watch that and just don't and you just don't know. But later on, I'm gonna kill you too. I don't freaking know, y'all. I have no idea. So let's see what the F happened, man.
later, Kim came out of the bedroom wearing something sexy, and she looked at Steve and smiled and said, "Come on, get in bed. I'll join you in a second." And so Steve's like, "Great, my plan is working. We're going to reconnect here." He climbed in bed and he laid down. Then Kim, she walked over and got something out of her bag, and then she walked back over to the bed and she pulled out a syringe and she stabbed it into Steve before he could do anything, and she injected him with something called succinylcholine. Kim had access to this drug from her job as a surgical tech. Succinylcholine is used to relax people's muscles during surgery, but if you give someone too big a dose, it can stop their breathing. And this drug works pretty much instantly, which means Steve would have seen his wife stab him with that syringe, but then instantly he would have been totally paralyzed, but fully awake and fully alive. And so as he was laying there, he would have seen his wife put the syringe down and then grabbed lighter fluid and then walked over to him and calmly poured the lighter fluid all over Steve's face and chest. And then one of Steve's final images he likely saw before his lungs stopped working and he died was his wife striking a match and lighting him on fire. After
Holy ish, my brothers and sisters. I'm at a loss for words, man. This whole video, y'all, I've been sitting right here talking about I'm suspicious of Steve. I'm not suspicious of Steve. Now I'm suspicious of him again. Maybe he took her to go murder her at this damn vacation place. Come to find out, it's the damn lady the whole time. I know out there, y'all, and some of y'all was thinking this about her, thinking that she had May was the one who did it or was suspicious or whatever. But me personally, that thought never even came in my mind, man. Why the hell did she do this to Steve? You could have just left him. Then this a terrible murder too. Sticking him with a syringe that basically paralyzed him, but he's still alive. Then he can actually he see you pouring this gas and throwing this match on him, and he can't do nothing about it. That's a like this lady evil as fuck. What she, dude? Why did she pick this time to do it at this damn vacation? This is just a whole different path that I didn't even think we was gonna go on, y'all. Wow.
Lighting Steve on fire, Kim casually walked out the backsliding door. She shut it, leaving it open just a crack, and then she made her way to the resort lobby where she put on this big act about how her cottage was on fire and she thinks her husband was still inside. And Philip overheard Kim say that her husband might be inside the cottage, which is when he and his cousin jumped into action. They ran to the cottage and ultimately found Steve deceased inside of the cottage. Ultimately, Kim never intended to give Steve a second chance in their marriage. She was already having an affair with a much younger man who was in the Marines, and she was just done with Steve. And so as Steve began telling his friends and family how he was going to make a huge effort to save his marriage, Kim was going around to her friends and literally openly talking about how she wanted to murder her husband. But nobody took her seriously. They thought she was just kind of venting and being kind of dramatic. But as soon as the news broke that Steve had died in this fire and Kim had not, people rushed to the police to tell them, pretty sure Kim had something to do with this. Kim was convicted of her husband's murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison. It would turn out the primary reason why Steve was so secretive before going on this trip was he really wanted it to be this unbelievably special, romantic, kind of like recreation of the couple's first date. And so what he was doing is he was calling all of Kim's friends and family members and asking them questions about things Kim liked because he wanted to incorporate all of her interests in this trip. And then after these calls, when Steve was writing in his journal, that was not just writing down like logistics of the trip. He was also writing down how much he loved Kim and how excited he was for their future and what they would build together as a family. I mean, Steve really believed they were on a path to reconciliation, but of course, that just was not the case. This past week,
This one right here, like, seriously just got me at a loss for words, y'all. I did not think it was her. I'm thinking, it didn't even cross my mind that she could be the murderer in this story, man. And I just feel so bad now that MrBallen has revealed that, yes, when Steven was being all secretive on the phone and writing in his journal, it was all love for Kim, man. He was trying his best to do something to keep his wife. And she already had been effing off with somebody else before then, and she already knew she was gonna leave him. But it's just like, damn, lady, why didn't you just leave him? Why you had to kill him? I don't know, man. I'm glad, hey, one thing for sure, y'all, that y'all know about me, I'm glad that she got life in prison. I can say that. I'm glad she got life in prison. I'm glad she got caught as soon as she did, too. And I'm glad that her dumb ass was going around town telling her friends and family about how one day she gonna kill him, and then it actually happened, and who they gonna point the finger at? Yo, dumb ass. So I'm glad that she was going around telling that, man. But wow, man, this is just one of them ones where I was wrong the whole time, y'all. Like, I was completely off base, man. I'm thinking Steven was gonna kill her. At the very beginning, I was thinking a boogeyman type thing where both of them was gonna be killed while they was staying in this cottage. Then I switched to Steve, and I couldn't get off Steve. And I think he innocent, then I think he's suspicious. It was just like, I was so focused in on him, and the killer was his damn wife. Man, this shit is crazy, y'all. It is crazy. But I digress, man. I'm gonna let y'all go. This is a shorter video than we usually do over here, man. I need for y'all to hit that like button, comment, and subscribe if you ain't yet before you leave. And you know that I gotta leave you with this. Love, peace, and happiness. Stay safe. Don't stop. Keep going. Yeah.